I'm Aaron Ellis, and welcome to Epic Insights with Ovations, a Nobody Studios portfolio company. This is the show where we bring you exclusive conversations with world-class experts, advisors, and top talent making waves and shaping the future of business. Whether you're a business leader, entrepreneur, or just passionate about personal and professional growth, you're in for some game-changing insights. Let's dive in. Welcome to this episode of Epic Insights with Ovations. I'm your host, Aaron Ellis. Today, I am joined by Christopher Chin. Now, Christopher is a keynote speaker, a corporate workshop facilitator, and a communication and presentation specialist. After 15 years working for Fortune 500 companies like Humana and Fannie Mae, seeing many executives passed over for promotions because they couldn't present, they couldn't tell a story, or speak with confidence, Christopher saw a need he felt led to fill. Now he works with companies all around the world offering highly specialized trainings targeting pain points he knows all too well from his time in the industry. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for having me on.
I know I pointed to some of this, but can you share a little bit about your journey that led to what you're doing today in your words?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest problems I saw when I worked in the tech industry was over-reliance on technology. And that might sound counterintuitive, but this is the reason for that. At the heart of any business, it needs to come back to people. People trust people. And technology needs to be created to serve people's needs. What I saw a lot of was this distortion of perspective happens when technical professionals create their great work, but forget that people part, the soft skills part, the communication part. So I saw a lot of technical professionals I worked with or were managed by, they made fantastic stuff, but when it failed to be communicated in a way that people understood its value, it failed to have impact. Gathered dust on a shelf, and a lot of money and time and resources were wasted. So I said, I want to make it my mission to help close this gap I see in the industry. There's so many great people out there talking about technology, but this gap, this communication gap between technology teams and the business, that's the gap I want to help fill. And the way to fill that gap is through better communication.
So I'm going to take this moment to say to you and to the audience that we had you come in and share exactly what you said to the leadership team of Nobody Studios. And you did exactly that. You communicated things in such a simplified way that potentially, honestly, I believe your communication style and the way you did it made it understandable. Awesome. Otherwise, it could have been completely like, what is this guy talking about? And you could have, one of the things that I love to help other experts and speakers get to is where they're captivating the audience the whole time, where people aren't checking out, and nobody checked out on the call you did. And the feedback was amazing. So thank you for that. But also I wanted to let everybody hear that too, because you truly do, you practice what you preach and you actually do live this. So that being said, I know we're going to dive into a lot of stuff around AI today. And that's a big topic. It's been a big topic for quite a while. And I heard a statistic, and you can correct the statistic if you know it's differently, but I heard the other day that 79% of all businesses will be disrupted by AI. Now, you can correct the number if you want. I don't think that's as important as the word disrupted. So what I would like to hear from you is your perspective on how they're being disrupted, but also I love disruption. That's literally the foundation of innovation for me. You know what I mean? So I would love to hear your perspective on that.
I believe AI has fundamentally disrupted the majority of industries just by the fact that it can do things so much faster than humans can. I was working in one company doing some design for a website, and I would spend so much time writing that code. But ChatGPT and other AI tools can now generate that code within seconds. It's amazing what it can do. I believe that statistic that you said, I don't know where it's from, but I'll throw another statistic in there that can complement this discussion, which is there was a survey by Altair conducted last year that said 30 to 50% of AI initiatives have failed. So this is a counterpoint to that discussion. Yes, there's a lot of positive disruption, but if we don't use AI in the right strategic way, we're going to waste a lot of time, money, and resources. And the reason for a lot of the failure of those projects is AI is not just a technology problem. As I mentioned before, it's a big people problem. If people don't understand how to use AI, if they don't understand why they're using AI, it'll be seen more as a threat to their job security than an asset they can use to complement their work.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I want to ask you about. What are you doing? Because we're talking about communication here, which I think that communication is is the foundation of literally helping companies thrive. It's also one of the biggest problems when they're not thriving. their communication skills and how they're communicating. So if you are doing this, what are you doing to bring that sort of peace of mind to the minds of people in companies who think that they're going to lose their jobs, or they're going through what we talked about offline, the typical craze that happens with any innovation that comes into the market? So how are you doing things to help, like in some of the work you do and some of the trainings you offer, are you addressing that? Are you helping bring down that stress level and help people understand how they can participate in this? Potentially, like the way I said it before offline, that they might not necessarily lose their job, but those who aren't willing to adopt AI and learn how to utilize it may lose their job.
Yeah. Right? I do workshops and trainings for companies focusing on how do you communicate data well and how do you use AI to enhance that process. And I focus on this from a data perspective because data is filled with insights within it. But if you can't cull that out and then communicate it well to people, it will have zero value for them. So there was this belief in the industry many years back in the tech and data industry that data is the new oil, was the common phrase. But that has been largely disproven in the sense that if you have more data, that doesn't necessarily mean you have more money or more value. You need to do stuff with that. You need to process, refine it. You need to extract the insights from it in order to do something valuable with it. So what I do for companies in my data storytelling and communication workshops is say, okay, we have all this data. Now, what is interesting about this? Why does it matter? What can people do about it? So it's not just about talking about what's going on historically, which is traditionally what a lot of data analysts do, but enhancing that with the higher level strategic perspective of the business. What can they actually do about it? That's the key piece, the what, the now what, and the so what of the data.
The what's, the now what, and the so what.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really, really cool. Now, let me ask the question this way. What can companies look at, or the problems they're facing, that would connect the dots on, oh, that's what Christopher would help with? When they're assessing what's going on in their company, you know, a lot of times I've had like, well, how do I know who to look for? I'm always like, well, look at the problem.
Yeah.
How do you match up that? How could you help them understand how, as they're assessing what's going on, or whether, because a lot of times it's reactive, it's stressful, right? Yeah. What do you do, and how can we help them understand how to connect that dot to you?
Deloitte released a survey in 2019 that established 5 levels of insight-driven maturity, which means for all these companies that have data, how well are they converting that into insights that can be used to drive better decisions? The majority of companies in that survey said they were at the bottom 3 rungs of that ladder. They were just aware of data and analytics, but hadn't really executed it well. What I do is I come into companies and help them elevate to those higher levels of insight-driven maturity. So if companies are experiencing, they have a ton of dashboards and data and reports, but nothing is being done about it. Executives aren't making better decisions. Decision-making is slow. People are watching these data presentations and tuning out, and it's boring. Then they might say, okay, maybe we need better communication training. Maybe we need to help our data professionals who know all this stuff and our technical experts communicate better to the business what the value of it is and what they should do about it. So if companies are experiencing those issues, that lack of insight-driven maturity, which is often signaled by lower financial returns from data investments, that's where I can come in and fill that gap.
Got it. That totally makes sense. I had another thought around this, and it just escaped me, but I'm gonna find it again here. What was it? It'll come back to me. I'm sure it'll come back to me. It was relevant to what you were saying. I know part of it was around, you know, as I've been working for the last few decades with companies, I meet them where they're at, which is usually reactive, but I always work towards getting them proactive, meaning what's coming next year? Where do you want your company to be? And because I've been a startup junkie for so long, I know where things are going to go and what the potholes are going to be. And I'm like, you know, let's, you know, utilize my dummy tax, right? I paid it, right? So are you seeing the ability with what you to move from that? And we'll put this in a framework of innovation right now. And innovation, everything's going faster and faster and faster. So the need to be proactive is probably even becoming more and more important, right?
Yes.
What are you doing to move a company from that reactive state to where they're trying to catch up to be able to get ahead of the curve, per se?
One issue I commonly see in companies that I work with is that very reactive mindset. So data teams and tech teams, for example, are often just a bunch of, their mindset is largely order taking. So they'll receive requests from the business and stakeholders saying, hey, I want this data. Can you make this report? Can you generate this for me? Constantly, all these ad hoc requests. And that just means the data team is just an order-taking machine. But they can be much more than that. They can be proactive. They can themselves identify, here is an issue in the business. I found this myself. This is what you can do. This is, if you give me the funding for this, I can help you solve this problem. So what I do for companies is teach them to advocate for themselves. Yes, you have all this tremendous treasure trove of expertise. How can we use that in a more proactive way to communicate to the business, not just all the things they want right now, but what do they actually need for the future?
You literally just explained one of my philosophies, that life is not about give and take or give to get, it's in the giving we receive.
Yes.
So if we have a company who's wanting to stay ahead of the curve of innovation and wanting to stay ahead of that, how can they help other companies stay ahead of it? That will keep them stay ahead of it. That literally will keep them ahead of it. You know what I mean? It's really interesting how that's what I took out of what you said, right? And I don't think a lot of companies think that way, but I think they can. I think they can come forward thinking and stuff. And this is somewhat related to what we're talking about, but I know that you've been in Fortune 500 companies and now you're someone outside of them, but still working with them, right? What have you been seeing with the older leadership and the newer leadership coming in? I love that, by the way. I love going into companies where there's heads butting and stuff, because I can create winners on both sides of the table. Right? I just create a space where we work the other way. What are you seeing in that as far as bringing in those innovations, and are the younger generations embracing it faster and more eagerly than the older generations? And what are you doing to basically address that?
One thing I see, because I work with companies around the world as well, is not just the generational differences, but also the cultural differences, and especially as relates to communication. For example, there are countries in the world where, for example, punctuality is not the value it is here in the US. So it's more okay to show up late to these things. And when you have a cross-cultural team with people participating in meetings from around the world, that can cause friction. Or if you have people from cultures that tend to communicate more indirectly, so they don't like direct assertive communication, if you are assertive with them, that can come off as hostile and offensive. It's so important to be cognizant and purposeful with our communication, understand those differences. So generational, as you mentioned, cultural is another example, and establish from the very beginning of every meeting, or the beginning in town halls of organizational culture, how should we treat each other? What are our expectations around attending meetings, communicating? And with those clear expectations, then we can heal all those divides and become more collaborative as a team.
Wow. So yes, absolutely. So now I'm curious, is this part of the foundational things you do with companies, is help them understand those communication gaps?
It is. Yes. It's understanding, how do we communicate better on a team-to-team basis? How do we advocate for ourselves? How do we push back against unreasonable requests? How do we ask the right questions? I think listening and asking the right questions is an underrated, underlearned skill. So it's, in addition to the speaking well, it's also, how do you listen well? And by listening well, you can actually identify what the needs are that other people have.
I love that. I've gone into companies and what I'm about to say is taken out of context, so everybody don't take this out of context, was I really truly know that if communication skills are consistently developed in the exact way that you and I have been saying it, we're looking at everybody equally and honoring everybody equally. We don't need DEI. We don't need all these other things because we're already doing it. Follow me? A lot of those programs and stuff were created, from my perspective, out of poor communication. You know what I mean? They were like a Band-Aid went to a deeper problem. And the reason I'm bringing this kind of one thing up is, as you know, we're working on what we're calling our Epic series. We're also working on, just a little taste for the audience, what I call the Epic series, where I love to go into companies that, of course, we will go into a company who has a problem and we'll address that problem. When I do that, I can also see where the roots of that problem are growing from. What I really love is to be able to go into a company that says, hey, Aaron, we're ready to go. Let's tear those roots out. Come in and disrupt everything for us. So I'm creating a series of experts, and I see you on that panel as well. Then this could be panels too that we put out there, where we're going into the companies where they're open enough and they understand enough that they've been they've been putting Band-Aids on wounds. You know what I mean? They haven't gone to the root, and they're ready to uproot it. And they get, even though they don't know how to do it yet, which we'll bring to them, that if they do address the root, they'll get so much further down the road faster, where they think if they go that deep, it's going to disrupt everything. It's going to take too long. So I'm not curious. I'm just curious on if you have any thoughts on what I just shared there, but I totally see sitting on that too as well.
I love that. And to add on, one additional aspect of communication I like to tell organizations about is leadership is communication. And research studies have shown that connection between leadership and communication. If leaders communicate well, meaning that they make the tasks they want clear and concise and direct, and also that they build relationships well with their employees, then employees will be more likely to see them as leaders and more likely to see themselves as part of the organization. Yeah. So it has such a powerful benefit if you can communicate well at all levels.
I love it, which is another reason why in the box that I check why I love startups. I love to do this from the ground up. I'll do it wherever it needs to be done, but I love it from the ground up. So I know we're hitting about 16 and a half minutes. I love to bridge the personal and professional because I don't think they're separate. Yeah. So I always like to know, who is Christopher outside of work? Does he have a family? Is there kids involved? Is there, what do you like to do in your
What I love doing is making music. And this is something we can relate to, both of us.
That's right.
Yes. So I love making music. I actually let go of that for a long time because I was originally a composer, but needed to transition into tech and data largely for financial stability. And in the course of that, had to let music go to pursue studying all this stuff and transitioning into the field. But I've been picking it up again in recent years. Love playing piano, violin, all my instruments. And it lets me get back in touch with my super creative roots. So that's a huge part of my identity.
I love that. Is there any family, any kids, anything, or
a wife? No kids yet.
Okay, no kids yet. Dogs, cats, pets?
I used to have 2 dogs, 2 cats. I had a huge German Shepherd and a small Maltese at one point. So it was wonderful walking them down the street and getting on the stairs.
I love that. I had basically a hybrid wolf and a chihuahua at the same time.
Oh, wow.
It was the same kind of thing. And the funny thing is the person who walked the hybrid wolf was about 5 feet tall and 100 pounds, and I walked the chihuahua. It was double funny. So, well, let me ask you this. Is there anything you have coming up? Anything you want to share? Anything, things that you want to make sure that we discuss today?
I do have a TED Talk coming up, a TEDx talk on the combination of music and data storytelling. So what is the link between performing music well, engaging an audience, and also telling a good story with data? Are
you getting ready to present it? Then it'll hit
I'll be giving it in August 2024, so this year in a few months, and I'm in the process of writing the talk.
Where are you doing the talk?
It'll be in DC, Logan Circle.
In DC, very cool. That's cool. So if people are in that area, and I'll have you remind me of that, so we can potentially put this out around that time as well. That's awesome. I'm really, really intrigued to hear that. And there's a lot of things, rabbit holes that we can go on outside of this call that have to do with that. So let's see here. When it comes, I want to think about AI, and I want to think about, let's see, a case study. Because we've been working with a lot of different clients and getting ready to deploy these epic series, these 8 experts doing 8 different talks, on a topic, and AI is one of them. What do you feel is one of the most important topics for every company, or even a few topics that every company needs to embrace? Meaning, yes, we're going to specialize these to the company. We're going to make sure that it's industry specific for them and stuff like that. But what are the essential things that every company really needs to embrace right now when it comes to AI?
I think they need to embrace using AI to enhance empathy. This is something I talked about in that talk for Nobody Studios. We commonly use AI as a transactional machine. We give it a prompt and we expect some output from it. But AI is so much more effective if we treat it like an actual human being and conversational partner. Imagine how powerful AI can be if you have an important interview coming up for a job and it can simulate that interview for you. Or imagine for this podcast, if I had an AI like ChatGPT pretend to be you and ask me questions, and then I say, how were my responses? How could I improve? If companies embrace that aspect about AI, it can make their employees much better at participating in meetings, giving presentations, and having empathy for each other. So there would be less perhaps disagreements and conflicts if people use AI in that more empathetic way.
Which I'm reminded of literally so many times over the last few decades, not as much in the recent years, where I would come in and talk to organizations like, no, Aaron, we need skill set work, not mindset work. We need skill set work. And then we'd go into all the frustrations around their skill set work until they realize, oh, we need mindset work, Aaron. So you're talking about some of the foundational things that if we put into the way we show up and flow through what we do is the way I phrase it, right? More empathetically. And we utilize AI to do that, right? Not only with our employees, but even employees can probably utilize that with themselves, right? With feedback. I love that you shared that. That's totally amazing. It's totally a foundational truth in my world, right? That a lot of companies just, for whatever reason, haven't embraced, or it's one of those things that they want to embrace out of the gate, but it easily falls away, right? Any final thoughts?
One thing I'd love to emphasize for anyone listening who might be nervous about their own communication skills is to realize the power of your own voice. This is something I didn't realize for the longest time in my life. And the reason this work is a mission for me is I used to be the most quiet, introverted person in school and hated communicating. I realized, though, that I was really setting my career back. And I wasn't getting the opportunities I wanted. I wasn't getting the promotions I wanted or the respect I wanted because I hadn't mastered this crucial life skill. Once I started to put in the effort and I communicated in a different way, I saw people treat me in a different way. And I realized how much influence I have just with the power of my own voice and just with the better mindset around communication. So if anyone listening is nervous or anxious about that, remember that anyone can really learn this skill, and just like any perhaps technical skill that you know.
Wow. I love that. That's a great place to end this. Thank you so much for joining us today, Christopher.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
All right, everybody. This has been another episode of Epic Insights with Ovations, and we'll see you on the next one.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Epic Insights with Ovations. I hope you found our conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with anyone who could use a little epic insight. Remember, the journey to growth never stops, so keep learning, stay curious, and let's continue building something extraordinary together. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.